The mountain was impossible to climb. That's what the British commandos said after failing twice to take it. That's what the American generals said when they stared up in its 3,000-foot cliffs. But the Devil's Brigade didn't believe in impossible. They believed in knives, darkness, and climbing straight up the mountain that couldn't be climbed. Lieutenant Tommy Prince pressed his body against the wet rock face and listened to the German machine gun team talking above him. They were maybe 30 feet higher up the cliff, completely unaware that an elite commando force was climbing toward them through the darkness. Prince allowed himself a thin smile. The Germans thought the cliff was unclimbable. They were about to learn differently. It was December 3, 1943, and the Italian campaign had ground to a bloody stalemate. The Allies were pushing north toward Rome, but the German defensive lines, collectively known as the Winter Line, held firm across the mountainous spine of Italy. And at the center of this defensive line stood Monte la Defensa, a 3,000-foot mountain fortress that dominated the Mignano Gap. Taking Monte la Defensa was essential. The mountain provided observation over all Allied movements in the valley below. German artillery observers on its summit could call in precise fire on any advancing unit. The British 56th Infantry Division had tried to take it twice, suffering heavy casualties both times. The mountain's approaches were covered by interlocking machine gun positions, mortar pits, and minefields. The Germans considered it impregnable. That's when someone remembered the Devil's Brigade. Officially designated the 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade was a joint American-Canadian unit created for special operations behind enemy lines. These men were trained in mountaineering, winter warfare, close-quarters combat, demolition, and parachuting. They were experts in unconventional warfare. And they were about to attempt something no conventional army unit would dare: a night assault up the sheer southern cliff face of Monte la Defensa, the face the Germans thought was impossible to climb. The operation began on December 2nd. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Frederick, commander of the force, assembled his men in a bombed-out farmhouse behind Allied lines. Rain drummed on the damaged roof as he briefed them. "Gentlemen, High Command has given us an interesting problem," Frederick said, pointing to a large-scale map of the mountain. "Monte la Defensa, 3,000 feet of rock, defended by elements of the 104th Panzer Grenadier Regiment. The British tried the conventional approaches. It didn't work, so we're going to try something unconventional." He traced the line up the southern face of the mountain, the cliff face. "We're going to climb it. At night. In the rain. And when we reach the top, we're going to kill every German on that mountain." The room fell silent. Then Sergeant Sam Finn, a Canadian lumberjack from British Columbia, spoke up. "Sir, begging your pardon, but that cliff is nearly vertical in sections. And in this weather, it'll be like climbing a waterfall." "I know," Frederick replied calmly. "That's why they won't expect us." The planning was meticulous. Scouts had spent days studying the cliff face through binoculars, identifying potential routes. Engineers calculated load bearing for the rock. Mountaineering experts from the force, including several men who'd climbed in the Rockies and the Alps, mapped out a route that might, possibly, be climbable. The key word being might. On the evening of December 3rd, 600 men from the Devil's Brigade assembled at the base of Monte la Defensa. They carried minimal equipment: rifles, knives, grenades, and rope. No heavy weapons. Nothing that would slow them down. They blackened their faces with burnt cork and wrapped cloth around their boots to muffle sound. At 1700 hours, they began to climb. Tommy Prince led the first wave, 60 men from the 2nd Regiment. Prince was a legend in the force, a full-blooded Ojibwa from Manitoba who could move through the wilderness like a ghost. His climbing skills were exceptional, and Frederick had personally selected him to lead the ascent. The first 100 feet were merely difficult. Steep, slippery rock, but with enough handholds to maintain steady progress. The rain had intensified, turning the mountain face into a cascade of water. Men climbed blind, feeling for grips, trusting their training and instincts. Then they reached the vertical section. "Jesus Christ," whispered Mike Donovan, staring up at the sheer rock face. "How the hell do we climb that?"
Prince had already found the route, a narrow crack system running up the cliff. He hammered in pitons, secured ropes, and began climbing. The rest of the team followed, hauling themselves up hand over hand, feet scrabbling for purchase on the wet rock. At one point, about 400 feet up, Private Johnny Johnson lost his grip. He plummeted downward, rope screaming through the belay point, until he smashed into the man below him. Both men hung suspended over a 300-foot drop, spinning slowly in the darkness. "Hold on," Prince hissed down. "Don't make a sound." Above them, German voices drifted through the night. The machine gun team was maybe 50 feet away, completely oblivious to the Americans hanging on the cliff below. Johnson and the other man slowly, agonizingly regained their footing and continued climbing. No one spoke. The only sounds were breathing, the scrape of boots on rock, and the endless rain. It took 4 hours to climb what should have been a 15-minute walk, but at 2100 hours, Tommy Prince hauled himself over the final ledge and found himself on a narrow shelf of rock, 20 feet below the German machine gun position. One by one, his team joined him. 60 men, soaked through, exhausted, and very angry at the mountain that had tried to kill them. Prince signaled for knives. Guns made noise. Knives were silent. They moved like shadows. The German machine gun team, 4 men huddled under a tarp, smoking cigarettes and complaining about the weather, never knew what hit them. The Devil's Brigade fell on them with knives and entrenching tools, brutal and efficient. In 30 seconds, the position was neutralized. But now came the hard part. They'd gained a foothold on the mountain. Now they had to hold it long enough for the rest of the force to climb up and join them. At 21:30 hours, all hell broke loose. A German patrol stumbled onto the silenced machine gun position and immediately opened fire. The muzzle flashes lit up the mountainside like lightning. Prince's team returned fire, their position betrayed. "Dig in," Prince shouted. "Hold this position at all costs." German reinforcements poured toward the sound of gunfire. The Devil's Brigade, outnumbered and holding a position the size of a tennis court on the side of a cliff, fought with desperate fury. Grenades tumbled through the darkness. Machine gun fire raked their position. Men died clutching the very rocks they'd worked so hard to reach. But they held. And below them, the rest of the force continued to climb. By midnight, 200 more men had reached the ledge. They pushed outward, capturing German positions in hand-to-hand fighting that was pure savagery. The Germans fought hard. These were experienced troops, but they'd never encountered anything like the Devil's Brigade. These men had climbed an impossible cliff in a rainstorm and now fought like demons in close-quarters combat. At 0300 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Frederick himself reached the summit, climbing rope hand over rope with his command staff. He immediately organized the defense against inevitable German counterattacks. "They'll try to push us off at dawn. Make every bullet count. We can't get supplies up that cliff easily, so conserve ammunition and fix bayonets. This is going to get personal." Dawn on December 4th revealed the full scope of what the Devil's Brigade had accomplished. They'd captured the summit of Monte la Defensa, establishing a defensive perimeter around the peak. Below them, German forces were frantically organizing counterattacks. The Germans hit them with everything: infantry assaults, mortar fire, even a Panzer IV tank that managed to climb the northern road halfway up the mountain before accurate rifle fire from the Devil's Brigade disabled it. For 3 days, the brigade held Monte la Defensa against continuous German attacks. Supplies were hauled up the cliff by rope. Wounded men were lowered down the same way. The men fought exhausted, cold, hungry, and low on ammunition, but they held. On December 6th, the Germans withdrew from Monte la Defensa. The mountain fortress that had stopped the British twice had fallen to an unconventional assault by 600 men willing to climb the impossible. The cost was heavy. The 1st Special Service Force suffered 511 casualties, dead, wounded, and missing in the battle for Monte la Defensa and the follow-up assault on Monte Remetanea. Nearly 85% casualty rate. But they'd achieved the impossible. News of the Devil's Brigade spread through both Allied and German forces. The Germans, shaken by the ferocity and skill of this unit, began leaving messages and warnings wherever the brigade was rumored to be operating. Das dicke Ende kommt noch, and Schwarze Teufel, Black Devils. The name stuck. From then on, the 1st Special Service Force was known as the Black Devils or the Devil's Brigade, the elite unit that climbed impossible mountains and won impossible battles. Tommy Prince survived the war and became the most decorated Indigenous soldier in Canadian history, receiving 11 medals, including the Military Medal and the U.S. Silver Star. After the war, he struggled with PTSD and poverty, dying in 1977. Lieutenant Colonel Frederick went on to command the force through numerous operations in Italy and southern France. After the war, he became a general and was awarded the Medal of Honor, not for Monte la Defensa, but for his overall leadership of the Devil's Brigade. The 1st Special Service Force was disbanded in December 1944, its mission complete. But its legacy lived on. The modern U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, trace their lineage directly to the Devil's Brigade. So does the Canadian Special Operations Regiment. And at Fort Benning, Georgia, where Special Forces soldiers train today, there's a monument to the Devil's Brigade. On it are engraved the words that define them. The Black Devils feared nothing. They climbed mountains no one else would climb. They fought battles no one else would fight. And they never, ever gave up. On Monte la Defensa itself, now peaceful Italian farmland, local residents still find equipment from the battle: rusted knives, spent shell casings, climbing pitons hammered into rock. Reminders of the night when 600 men climbed straight into hell and came out victorious. The mountain they said couldn't be climbed, the battle they said couldn't be won. Tell that to the Devil's Brigade.